Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to your first Rangers Review Europa League preview video as we look ahead to the group stage commencing, the new revamped group stage, of course. Rangers taking on Malmo away in Sweden on Thursday evening. And to give us a bit of an insight into what we can expect heading over to the Swedish city, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Malmo journalist Jonas Hansson, who writes for Gasetten, a news site that covers the club in great detail. Jonas, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Looking ahead to this game, I had a little peek at how Malmo have been getting on recently, and it's fair to say that they're doing pretty well. They go into this game after a thumping 4-0 win yesterday over Häcken. They're looking pretty good, are they not?
They look pretty good. They still have a chance to beat the record amount of points in Allsvenskan for a season. They have a huge lead in Allsvenskan, so they can focus a lot on the Europa League right now. They could probably even rest a few players between the games in Allsvenskan. But I think they are having a really good year for most parts of it. But it's still a few questions mark, because before this 4-0 victory, they had 2 straight draws, for example, and people have been getting a little bit grumpy about a few things. So it's a good team, but it's far from a perfect team this year.
So how did they play yesterday then? I mean, the scoreline was a scoreline that suggests that the Malmo were very dominant in that game. Did they deserve to win? I'd imagine 4-0, I guess, is quite convincing.
I don't think they were 4-0 good, and I think even the coach said that they have this player Anders Christiansen, who he was away from football for a year because he had a heart problem, came back this spring. He is usually the best player in Allsvenskan, so it was like, okay, but what's his status right now? And it's taken some time for him to come back, but he scored the 2 first goals in this game. Like, I think even the coach said that we had like 10 chances like that in the last 2 games, and we didn't score. But now Anders Christiansen had those chances, and then he nice long shot and one where he kept his coolness and just put it in close to the corner. So he was a big part of the scoreline being that comfortable in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I think 11 points they lead the way at the moment at the top of the table. They won the league last year. They look odds on now, Jonas, to go on and finish the job, I'd imagine.
I think people are already trying to figure out which game they are going to secure the goal, because if you look at, for example, they're doing a good season, but everyone else in Sweden is having a bad season. So I think people pretty much just think that right now that, okay, they will win the Allsvenskan goal, but how good will it be in Europa League? Because that's been a little bit, because they won against PAOK, who was champion of Greece, but they lost by 4-0 to Sparta Prague from Czech Republic. So it's a little bit like, how good are they in comparison to Europa League teams? That's a big question mark for Malmo.
Was that a big disappointment, the Champions League qualifiers, amongst the fan base? Were they expecting to reach the group stage?
I think in general, if you asked them before the qualifiers, they would probably said we're quite fine by going into Europa League. But I think people were a little bit disappointed that Sparta Prague wasn't maybe 4-0 good against Malmo FF, but it didn't really feel that Malmo had a huge chance. They had a chance because they had a penalty away when they were down 2-0, and that could have changed things. But other than that, it just felt like Sparta Prague was like one level above Malmo in quite a lot of things.
Yeah. Henrik, was it Rydstrom or Rydstrom, the coach? Can you tell us a little bit about him? Because he's enjoyed real good success at the club, hasn't he? And then what sort of style of play does he like to adopt there?
Yeah, I grew up as a supporter to the team he used to play for, Kalmar FF. He's a legend there. He played his entire career there. He won the goal there, which the only league title they have ever won and stuff like that. And he was a defensive midfielder with no real technique or anything. But it's kind of like he's almost the opposite when he's a coach. He's been like 5 or 10 years ago, he was very inspired by Pep Guardiola, as a lot of other coaches, in terms of building possession and stuff. But then he came to Malmo 1.5 years ago, and he kind of like changed his approach a little bit. Of course, they are always having high pressure. They always have a lot of the ball, but they have started playing it more. It's in Sweden. It's become quite famous word. Now it's in English, relationism, basically. So he's more looking into not like, okay, the player should be there and there and there. He's way more looking like, okay, how can these 11 players fit together as good as possible? I think he's taken a little bit more maybe from Carlo Ancelotti and players like that. Okay, how can I have the best players on the pitch and how can they cooperate? So he's changed a little bit as a coach, but also Malmö FF have so much more money than the rest of the teams in Allsvenskan. I looked it up a few years ago. It's basically like Bundesliga without Dortmund, like Malmö FF, Bayern Munich, and then there's of course Bayern Munich can sometimes lose the league title as we saw with Bayer Leverkusen, but they have so much more money because they were in the Champions League a few times. They have sold a lot of players. They had a record sale this summer, Nanasi to Strasbourg in France. So they have a lot of money, and they have much higher salaries than the rest of the team in Allsvenskan. So they should also win the league basically every year.
Yeah, with the resources. And in terms of how you expect them to play against Rangers on Thursday, do you expect them to be pretty offensive, to take the game to Rangers, be on the front foot?
I think so. If you had asked me that question maybe 2 months ago, I would have said for sure. But then we had a game against Sparta Prague. Malmo was a little bit, I'm not going to say passive. Yeah, a little bit more passive. They had a little bit more, older, more physical players on the pitch, try to kind of match that Sparta Prague's physicality. So they took a little bit step back and said, okay, we're going to like more fight for it. But I think that didn't work either against Sparta Prague. So I think they will try to go, okay, now we really want to play our type of football. And that's what made us so good this year. So for sure they will looking to attack, and they always do at home in Europa.
Yeah. Who are the players that Rangers need to be wary of, Jonas, do you think?
Anders Christiansen for sure. He's usually kind of a number 10 player. He's played in Malmo for a very long time, and the coach, one of the former coaches, said that he would have played like in Bundesliga for 10 years if he hadn't had so many muscle injuries and stuff like that. He's really good, and he's good at a lot of things. And then if there's anyone else, I think right now they haven't been good at corners the last 2 months, but they started the season basically scoring on corners every single game, basically. And a big part of that was Pontus Jansson. He was the captain at Brentford in Premier League. He left them despite being a starter to come back to Sweden. So him on set pieces will also be a factor, I think. And they have a lot of other players, but they've been like a little bit up and down with how they have performed so far. So it's a little bit difficult to say who will have a great game except those two.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you about Pontus because I used to cover a lot of Leeds United back in the day, and I spoke to Pontus a few times, and he never hid his love for Malmo. He's always obviously a big supporter and back playing for his beloved club. What's his form been like? Is he in his relationship with the fans? I guess you guys, Malmo fans, love him there.
That is the most difficult question you could ask right now, because there has been a few months ago there were some supporters. They got into prison because they had some fights with some other fans, and then they could show that Pontus Jansson, he was no part of this at all, but he was in a chat group with a few of these guys, so that became a major media story. I want to stress, Pontus had nothing to do with fights or anything, but he had connections with these guys, and then so that's been a big part of it. But I think in general, people really like him in Malmö. I think some of them are a little bit spoiled. So when he came back last summer, he didn't perform, like he wasn't the best player in Allsvenskan by any standards at that point. And I think some people were a little bit disappointed, like, okay, why doesn't he dominate here? He should go in and be basically the best player in Allsvenskan. And I think even during the spring, I don't think he even was the best centre half, because there was Derek Cornelius, who they sold to Olympique de Marseille, a Canadian centre half. But he's actually stepped up the last few weeks, I would say, and started to perform really well. And when he's performing well, they basically never concede any goal-scoring chances whatsoever. So he's very important for him now, especially with the sale of Cornelius to Olympique de Marseille.
Yeah, but there's another player that was linked to Rangers. I can't remember when, but a year or so ago, Eric Botheim, the former Bodo Glimt player. How is he getting on with Malmo?
He's kind of a fascinating guy because, as you said, he had his big breakthrough in Bodo Glimt. He was bought by a Russian club just before the invasion of Ukraine, and then he left, and then he got to Serie A, didn't perform. So he tried to have a new start in Malmo this winter, and then he came and he was so good. He scored a lot of goals, and he wasn't even really in his perfect position because he was playing maybe sometimes more of a 10, despite him being quite an obvious central striker. But they have another central striker, so he had to adjust a little bit. But he did it perfectly until the summer, and then obviously he scored a goal last game and made an assist. But there's been 2 months now where it's like, what happened to Botheim? He's just completely disappeared. So his form has been first great and then down, and now Malmö FF fans are hoping that this game, the last game they had, that it was kind of like bouncing back to his old self.
And I mean, in terms of Rangers have played at the stadium a couple of seasons, well, a couple of years down the years, and not had much luck. Lost on 2 occasions under Ali McCoist at the team, and then of course Steven Gerrard's side in that Champions League qualifier. Do you expect it to be a bit of a red hot atmosphere, Jonas? What can the players expect when they walk out the tunnel?
Yeah, I think they, like 10 years ago, this was, in terms of the number of attendances, it was an absolutely insane wall of noise from Malmö FF supporter when they got into Champions League the first time in 2014, when they played against Red Bull Salzburg and clubs like that, and even Celtic, and everyone in the opposition team said, okay, shit, this is difficult. Even Maurizio Sarri a few years ago, when he was a coach for Chelsea, he said like, this was like little Napoli, basically. It was that kind of, but it's been a little bit up and down the last few years. But in general, they have a really good reputation at home. The supporters, they are making a lot of noise in Europe. Malmö FF have won, I think it's 13 of the 14 last home games in Allsvenskan. So they're really good at home as well. They have like, I think the goal difference in those 14 games is like 39-5 or something like that. So they're really, I think that's usually their strength in Europe, is the home games and like the noise and how everyone comes together. I think that has been maybe the difference maker in a lot of European games. It usually is a difficult arena to play in.
Yeah, and of course, looking at some of the fixtures that Malmo have got coming up, I like to, well, apart from Rangers, Karabag, Olympiacos, you've got Besiktas, of course, Ferencváros, Galatasaray, FC20 and Slavia Prague. Looking at those games, Jonas, is qualification from the group stage achievable, do you think?
I think so. I think I've seen some sort of simulations where it's like you have to take about 10 points or something like that to have a good chance to go through. I think that's something Malmö FF kind of reaches for. I think if you look at the draw, they don't have those extremely difficult games, but they don't also have those really simple ones. They have a lot in the middle. Like a lot of games are supposed to be like versus Rangers right now. It's supposed to be quite even in a lot of those games. So I think they're kind of counting right now that they probably should go through, but we'll see. It depends a little bit of if they can like keep this up, because they have been a little bit worse after the summer break, dropping a few more points than usual and being quite bad away from home and stuff like that. So we'll see, but absolutely they want to go through.
Yeah, Scott Gervin gets in touch. Says, let's not forget Cholak. It'll be a really difficult challenge this time around again, in all honesty. Interesting fixture, yeah, absolutely. A number of Rangers Malmo connections, of course, not only Antonio Cholak, like I said, I think Robert Fritz played for Malmo famously back in the day. Jonas Tern, I think, before Jonas, Joshan Bjorklund, I think, played for Malmo, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So a number of links there. It will be intriguing. How do you see it going on Thursday, Jonas?
I think Malmö FF will come out quite hot at the beginning, unless Rangers surprises them with their tactics, because they've shown a few times if they're a little bit surprised by the tactic, it can take a little bit of time for them to adjust. But if they know what they're getting when they play Rangers, I think they will come out hot, and I think they will be difficult to play against the first 10-15 minutes. And then Rangers should just aim to keep a clean sheet during those minutes, and then see if they can eat into the game. I think that's basically what's going to happen. But it's also like I've been selling this team because supporters are really happy right now. They won 4-0. They are top of the table by a huge margin. They won against PAOK from Greece, but they've also been like, okay, but 0-0 away to this team. Okay, we lost home to this. Okay, so I don't think people really know exactly what to expect when they turn on Malmo FF on the telly. So we'll see. But I suspect Malmo FF will go out and try to be as brave and as intense as they can.
Yeah, interesting. And I think it probably around a couple of thousand Rangers fans heading over to the game, Jonas. In terms of the atmosphere in and around the ground, is there plenty of like little bars and things like that? Is it safe for them to mingle amongst the Malmo fans who'll be dotted around the ground?
There is one square, like 15-minute walk, but that's usually for Malmo FF fans. So the area just around the stadium is quite boring. It's just apartments and a big park, basically. So but Malmo FF, it's kind of a small centrum, so you can always there's always half an hour walk to basically anything here. So it's quite small, but I think if you want to be in Malmo, you shouldn't plan to being just around the stadium, because then you'll have quite a boring time.
I'll take that. I'll take your advice, because I'm heading over myself. So I'll make sure to try and position myself where there's a bit more lively activity. But it's been great having you on, Jonas. Thank you very much for your insight into Malmo. Let's hope we get a good game, and Fox, let's hope we get a more positive Rangers result, certainly from my perspective, than we have witnessed in recent years at the Malmo Stadium. But thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
There you go, folks. A preview into Thursday night's big Europa League group stage opener against Malmo. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. I will be on a little bit later on with Chris, so hopefully you can join us for that. We're going to discuss the big talking points from John Gilligan's press conference this afternoon. Until then, we'll speak to you a little later on. Bye for now.